Ladies and gentlemen, as for now, we'd like to introduce our first guest speaker, an inspirational person who has shown through the years a great dedication in several fields such as intercultural education, as well as leading an international community that consists of 60 nationalities through the Hermitage International School of France. Our guest is one of the strongest proponents of Round Square, for which he served on the board as European Regional Director since 2006 until 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me introduce our honorable guest, Mr. Christopher Hunter, who is going to talk about the importance of adventure.
A lot of hard acts to follow. It's been quite the morning already. But here I am, in front of you all. Time to start. Mr. Rod Fraser, friend and chairman of Round Square. Mr. Merzaki, directeur de l'enseignement privé au ministère de l'Éducation nationale. Monsieur Abdelali ELARAKI, fondateur de l'école ELARAKI. Monsieur Younes ELARAKI, directeur de l'école. Mehdi ELARAKI, directeur du collège. To all of my colleagues and friends, to all of the students gathered here today, hello, bonjour, assalamu alaikum. Aux élèves d'ELARAKI, ici aujourd'hui, je dis, c'est bien d'être de retour. J'aime beaucoup cette école, j'aime beaucoup cette ville, j'aime beaucoup ce pays. And to those of you, including my students and my dear colleague Xavier, I say, welcome to the ELARAKI School. Soyez les bienvenus à Marrakech. Ahlan wa sahlan. C'est un honneur et un privilège d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui pour l'ouverture de cette première conférence des deux régions d'Afrique et d'Europe. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today for the opening of the first African-European Round Square Conference. Younes, a heartfelt word of thanks. Your efforts and vision have brought together for the first time our two neighboring regions, 150 students and teachers from 24 schools representing 10 countries. You give us a fantastic opportunity to discover your beautiful school and the famous and striking city of Marrakesh, and to work together as regions to build a common future. Your conference theme is uplifting and will provide an inspiring starting point for the many discussions to come. And second, in truth, Younes, I'll thank you for giving me this opportunity to address this great gathering once it's over. Thank you. Younes, you wrote that my speech should be motivational, about resilience, about an adventurous spirit, perhaps reaching into my own experience to inspire the young people seated here with us. Frankly, I am the one who is inspired at just being here with all of you, at just feeling the energy radiating from your many smiles and the warm welcome you have extended to me since my arrival. Students, you come here not simply as participants in a conference, but as messengers and ambassadors for your schools. And over the next few days, you will have the privilege of enjoying a unique experience of discovering a beautiful city, of meeting new friends, of having intense discussions, and of reflecting on who you are and on your place in this world. And then you will leave to return home again, and more importantly, as messengers and ambassadors for what you will have experienced here, for Round Square and for its ideals. Together, you are embarking on a new adventure. And who is to say what impact these 5 days will have on you in your future? But why call this an adventure? Where are the ropes? the ice picks, the crampons? Where are the packs and the provisions to hold us over in case of harsh weather? To quote John Amat, an expeditionist and a climber of Everest, adventure isn't hanging on a rope off the side of a mountain. Adventure is an attitude that we must apply to the day-to-day obstacles of life. That definition of adventure as an attitude, a state of mind, a way of embracing one's life suits me just fine. I've never been a rope dangler or a cliff scaler. The best my fingers could do was to race over a piano's 88 keys. I modestly admit that I have done some climbing, and more memorably, been saved by a guide when falling from a sheer ice face at 3,900 meters in the Swiss Alps, and then rejoiced that I was still there to laugh about it. I have witnessed the dangers of marching over treacherous glacial ice as the day warms and the sun's first light and crevasses open up, ready to swallow you whole. I've traversed a glacier field and seen my brother drop suddenly out of sight, felt the belaying rope go taut with his weight as he plunged deeper into the crevasse, pulled on the rope with all my might, as did the guide on the other side, and seen my brother pop out like a champagne cork. And I've heard my brother yell for joy, "I'm alive." So for me, adventure isn't only hanging onto a rope on a cliff face, although it could be that too. And it isn't only crossing a desert with a pack on my back and hope in my shoes. For me, adventure is a state of mind, a way to embrace what I experience each day. When I asked my sports coach what adventure meant to him, he said, every day is an adventure, from the moment I leave my house to the moment I return. So many things can happen in between. I wonder at what the day will bring. And it is in the wondering at what the day will bring that I find this spirit of adventure, this way of embracing experience. Adventure is in our capacity to be astonished at any moment of the day. It is in the vitality that we bring to our efforts, to our relationships, to our work. It is in the openness of spirit that compels us to question what we experience. The spirit of adventure is not only in the how and the what, but also in the why and the what for. It's in the intensity of our feelings, in the attention we give to the world around us, to the keenness of our senses, to the depth of our awareness of others and ourselves. Love takes us on an adventure, as does hate. One leads to magical sunrises and beautiful sunsets, the other into darkness and destruction. Adventure begins in the first years of our lives. In our earliest childhood, we wander off, at least I did at 12 months. We run after animals that are twice or thrice our size, those bushy cats and dogs, and we imagine with some horror all the beings, the giants, the dragons, and the dinosaurs that might be waiting for us in the garden outside. We try everything that comes in front of us. We can speak any language we hear. Then we grow up. We forget the awesome capacity for discovery we had as very young children. We learn what we are told to learn. We pay attention to what we are told to pay attention to. We become socially identifiable, part of a group. We conform. We forget that for a whole year when we were little, the only question we asked was why. Then we must learn again. We must break the walls that we have constructed and that bind us in. We must struggle to let our real selves emerge. We must fight to let our imagination inform our dreams. And yes, we must fight for our dreams. For Helen Keller, who was struck deaf and blind from illness at the age of 19 months, and who gave inspiration to so many who fought as she had to overcome incredible hardships, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. And as Tolkien wrote in his classic tale of adventure, it's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. I first truly set step out my door when I was 14 years old, and my parents sent me to Europe to join my best friend, whose family had gone to spend the year in Switzerland. Most of you might think, that all you have to do is hop on a plane, fly to Zurich, and wait to be picked up, which sounds pretty logical. In my case, my father chose a different route for me, the roundabout route, by freighter, and a Yugoslavian one at that. I, at the age of 14, was to be a shipmate for 25 days. The 25 days that it would take to go from the harbor in New York City to Venice, with 5 ports of call in between. After 5 days crossing the Atlantic Ocean and one storm that sent the ship crashing over the waves and threw me seasick and groaning over the side of my bunk, my first steps off the SS Klek were here in Morocco, in Tangier, a port city on the Mediterranean. I remember looking over the ship's railing and seeing men rushing all about, carrying heavy packs on their backs, donkeys pulling carts laden with cargo, and hearing the sounds of the ship's cranes laboring under the weight of the bundles being offloaded, and the shouts of the men doing the work. The sun was so bright and the day was so hot. I was terribly excited. With 3 boys from Chicago that I'd met on board, we went into the city to the Casbah. And there I was totally and absolutely astonished by the hustle and bustle, the closeness of the shops, the white robes of the people, the delightful airiness of it all. It infused me with joy. Tangier was definitely the most exciting place I had ever seen in my life. There was no way to share what I was experiencing with my parents, brothers, and sisters. Imagine this, there were no cell phones back then. I ached to tell them what I was seeing and hearing, to share my stories. I had to store it up inside and let it grow there like a slow fire. From Tangier, we headed up to Genoa, where the port overwhelmed me with the size of its cranes, and then we continued on to Naples. In the first hours of the morning, there was great excitement on board, and everyone seemed to be roused. 2 speedboats accosted our ship, and we watched as the sailors lowered cases of cigarettes and other contraband over the side to the waiting commandos. Later that same day, on our visit to the historic Roman city of Pompeii, buried long ago in a cloud of volcanic ash, I bought my father a book about the ancient site, which I packed preciously in my suitcase, knowing that it would be 2 more months before I could return home to see him. Our ship continued on to Sousse, Tunisia, where I rode through the desert on a camel. We then traversed back across the Mediterranean and up the coast of Yugoslavia. The ship's captain had brought his American family with him and wanted to show them the villages of his homeland. So we sailed up along the coast as close to the shore as he could bring us. I stood the entire way on the ship's narrow bow, leaning out over the water and marveling at the people who had come out onto their balconies to wave sheets in greeting to the ship as it blew its horn and the sound reverberated along the house fronts. When we finally arrived in Venice, I had to disembark, which was a moment of great sadness for me. I had become friends with many of the sailors and had come to know every corner of the ship from the captain's deck down to the engine room. I was also anxious because I was setting out on my own by train, first for Milan and then for Zurich. Once the train had pulled into the Milan station, I waited there for what seemed the longest time until an elderly woman took interest in my plight, looked at my ticket, and pointed me in the direction of the right train. The ride through the Italian Alps was jaw-dropping, and I dreamt of returning there one day to build a fabulous hotel. I arrived in Zurich late in the night, and my friend with his family was there to meet me. We drove to Effingen, a small village halfway to Basel, and in the morning I opened the shutters of my room to see an ancient woman climbing the narrow street with a huge pile of cut wood on her shoulders. I didn't really know it at the time, but my love for discovery was born. Should I be embarrassed to share this with you, to expose such a formative time, a time when I was just a tall, gangly adolescent and my glasses would fall off if I wasn't careful? Yes, it was another time, that time before all of this technology, a time when being on one's own meant just that. It meant trusting in oneself to figure out what was going on. relying on one's instinct, on one's gut feeling, and finding out that it didn't always work. But how would this impact me? How would I make sense of this experience, and how would it affect my decisions later on in my life? When I returned home to Amherst, I was feted by my parents and stared at a lot by my younger brothers and sisters. They saw that I had changed. Yes, I was taller, but I projected a confidence and a strength which hadn't been there before. For a while, whenever my parents had their friends over to dinner, they would refer to me as the world traveler and ask me to recount my journey, which I did as skillfully as possible. Recounting my story helped me to make sense of it and to appreciate what I had experienced. I didn't get a chance to tell my classmates about it, though, as my father proposed that boarding school would give me the chance to continue my education in more challenging circumstances. So again, off I went, and challenging it was. But what I really took away from that time on the SS Kleck was that adventure could transform me. Adventure could change the way I viewed the world and myself. It taught me that I had the capacity to reach out, to embrace the empty seas and expansive skies, that I could be alone and overcome the feelings of loneliness, that I could experience the unknown and make it my known, and that doing so made me feel alive. And it helped me to dream of what I might do tomorrow. As Oprah Winfrey has said, the biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams. And so it was in following my dream of becoming a concert pianist that I found myself 5 short years later sitting in front of a grand piano on the stage of the Duke Biddle Auditorium in Durham, North Carolina. To my right sat what seemed like thousands of people staring at me, waiting for the music to start. To my left, the conductor stood elegantly tall and stern in his black tuxedo, and the orchestra was poised for the imminent downward beat of his baton. I was petrified. I looked down at my hands, which seemed to belong to a different man, a bolder and more confident man, someone who had dreamt of playing Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto in public. Was it really me? Was I really sitting there about to embark on a hair-raising ride through the tumultuous Russian musical landscape drawn by this terribly romantic composer? The conductor raised his arms, took a sudden breath, and we started. The horn delivered the opening notes, ta-ta-ta-dum, and then whoosh, like an avalanche of sound crashing down on me. The entire orchestra blasted away. I held onto my seat and prayed. Never had I heard such a sound, like the engine of a huge locomotive, and it was heading directly for me. I raised my hands, and the miracle happened. The music came pulsing out of me, and I felt a rush of joy, just enough to push away the fear. I made it through the first cadenza, a passage of terribly difficult arpeggios. Then, halfway through, my world, in front of all those people, fell apart. I had a memory lapse. Imagine that. After all those hours of preparation, I slipped. I couldn't find the notes for the life of me. The conductor stood his ground, realized he was in trouble, gave a quick indication to the orchestra. Yell, he shouted, which indicated a spot in the music. I got back on the rushing train and wondered, what next? How will I make it through to the end? I was shaking like a leaf, my feet hardly able to stick to the ground. I felt as if I was rising off the bench and into a dark cloud where I might thankfully disappear. But then I felt a stab of courage. I can do this, I told myself. I can play this thing. My hands steadied, my breathing returned to normal, and I immersed myself in the beauty of the sounds I was finally creating with the instrumentalists gathered around me. Together, we made a beautiful moment. And afterwards, backstage, I stood in wonder as my parents congratulated me, and my teacher, evidently relieved, caught my shoulder and said, "Well done, you pulled it together. I knew you could." Our inner strength, it is in the moment of our peril that we discover it, that we feel it and cherish it, like a tender fire just growing in spite of the wind. It's there for each of us. Some will call it by other names, courage, grit, resilience, but it's there. You just have to grab at it and not give up. Failure is when we stop trying. It's not enough that others believe in us, we must believe in ourselves. Some 2 decades later, I was to find myself in India, north of the sprawling and densely inhabited city of Mumbai, in the slum of Malad, a long stretch of makeshift dwellings strung along the slopes of the Sanjay Gandhi National Park. There I saw that none of the children wore glasses and listened to the story of a local teacher and social worker who recounted discovering a 12-year-old boy whose near blindness had gone unnoticed. Upon my return home, I thought about that and imagined the project that would later become ICU2. On my next trip to India, and in the course of our work, we came to explore an area of Mumbai where the men and women labor in stone quarries. I wondered how we could come in aid to these people who were bereft of any of the most commonplace elements of daily life: a place of quiet, a safe shelter, clean water, and food. As we proceeded to screen people in the area for vision problems, we encountered other NGOs, both from Mumbai and abroad, searching for a way to help. Like us, they were overwhelmed by the conditions people were living in, and some even compared the scene to a World War I battle scene. Heavy trucks passed by wearing deep tracks into the mud, while children ran alongside and their mothers tried to make a semblance of order. There was even a small classroom hidden in one collection of huts. The boxes used to store the few materials they had were marked in red: explosives. The situation at first caused me a deep sense of despair and fear. How could people live in such conditions? How could this even exist so close to the glowing splendor of downtown Mumbai's newest towers? These quarries, these workers were supplying the stone that was going into the buildings of the city's wealthiest corporations and individuals, and here they were living in rags. Believe me, I felt profoundly disturbed. But when was doing nothing a just alternative to doing something, no matter how small it might seem? Is it not written in the Quran that whomsoever should save one man saves all mankind? We joined forces with graduate students from the University of the London School of Architecture. We decided upon a common goal to construct a community center. The students prepared a detailed map to determine land ownership so that we could put forward a proposal. I made the trip to London over and again to consult with the university's team of students and professors. But this project became too great for the means and time we could bring to bear. Nonetheless, the students and teachers who made the journey with me took home with them a vital lesson. Together, we could build a common future, one that could improve the lives of countless people. And while our efforts that day did not bring the profound change to their daily lives that we had hoped for, we at least were able to alleviate some of the distress that those people experienced every day. Since our beginning, more than 10 years ago, we have screened more than 50,000 people for vision problems, supplied almost as many glasses, and enabled 5,000 cataract operations. We couldn't have done this alone. On the contrary, we've accomplished this together with our partners in India, Pierre Péon, founder of APEFIB, Daly College, the Dhirubhai Ambani International Schools, both Round Square schools, the Lotus College of Optometry, Choi Tram Hospital, Friends of Round Square India, and many others, along with hundreds of students. As one head of school said recently after we had finished the eye camp, can you imagine what it means to someone to be able to see clearly? It changes a life. It allows someone to do their work, a man to sew garments, a woman to do henna before a marriage ceremony, a child to read a book. My goal here is not to give you answers. It is not to tell you what adventure is or isn't. This is something you will have to discover for yourselves. My hope is to encourage you to embrace the adventures that will be yours, and to do so with courage, fortitude, and imagination, and with dedication, discipline, and desire. To do so, we must set aside, briefly but surely, our preening pride, our arrogance, our desire to be the medal winner, to crush those around us before we've even had time to forge relationships and to discover who they are and what makes them who they are. We must try a small measure of humility. Don't take your pride into the experience, but rather, as Rocky Balboa said to Creed, take back your pride from doing your best. You will encounter obstacles and difficulties, lots of them. And this will give you the opportunity to learn, to reflect, to invent, and to gather your courage to overcome them. Be adventurous. Take a deep breath. Look out around you, wherever you are, and enjoy the view. It will help calm you before you take the next step. Indeed, once your adventure is underway, there's little time for second thoughts. More often than not, you're part of a circle. Lean on it for support. Round Square is such a circle. Adventure has shaped my life and given it energy and purpose. I say this to you, as you search for your path, remember that if you keep an adventurous spirit, an open mind, and a willingness to challenge yourself, your imagination will carry you to places that your feet will surely follow. Together, we can embrace our world and work for a common and better future. The challenges are everywhere. Pick one. Start with that. In the days to come, reach out to those around you. Learn about them, about their world, their hopes, their dreams, and share yours. Maybe you will find common ground to start building a project together. And if ever you doubt what it is you are able to do, just remember, to paraphrase Kurt Hahn, there is more adventure in you than you know. I wish you all a great conference. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Shukran.
attention. Now we have 5 minutes left to do the Q&A. Do anybody have a question? Hello? Uh, um, how would you, whoa, how would you, how would you, how would you,
Can you repeat that just a little bit? How can? How would I, as myself, encourage you as Round Square students to unlock that adventurous side of yourselves? Well, that's a great question. That's really the heart of the matter. You know, I think every student here and every student listening to this has an unfathomable amount of potential. And we get so focused on the tests, we get so focused on the expectations, that it's like swimming just at the top of the water, you know? You're just swimming on top. And you know what happens when you go snorkeling and you forget to put a t-shirt on, you get a real bad sunburn? And you know, you really get hurt. It's exactly what happens. We're all getting sunburnt. We all stay on the top of the water and we get sunburnt. We forget that if we dive down deep, there's a whole world down there waiting for us. The question that each individual has to ask himself or herself is, do I dare dive down deep? Diving down deep is not easy. It's cold water. Currents are down there. If you're not an experienced swimmer, you can drown. You're alone. That's where the big fish are. It's fun being down there. So, it's a personal exploration. And the truth is that you can't do it alone. Because if you go alone, there's nobody there. And that's the great thing about being in Round Square. You are surrounded by people who want to dive down deep with you. But will they dare? All you have to do is say hello. All you have to do to begin your adventure is to expose what you are afraid to share, your hopes, your dreams. Because the last thing we want is to be disappointed, is to realize that our hopes and our dreams may not come true. But the extraordinary thing is that when you try, you find yourself on an extraordinary path. And the amazing thing is it's not a narrow path, it actually is a very wide path, because then you're meeting so many other people. And if you embrace a part of that movement, you can find yourself constructing a community center in a part of the world which you had never heard of before. Or you can find yourself in a part of a city helping people that you had never thought you would do. So you have to reach deep into yourself and you have to dive deep. And you have to remember it's scary at the beginning, very scary. But then you get used to it. And then you begin to enjoy it. My first night out on the SS Kleck when I was 14, actually it was the second night, there was a tremendous storm that struck the ship. And it was so dark, so incredibly dark. And I was all alone. And I climbed to the very top of the ship. I was outside and the rain was beating down on my face. And I said, what am I doing here? How can this be? You know, Mom and Dad are at home, my brothers and sisters are at home, and I'm here on this ship. Where am I going? And I had this tremendous feeling of homesickness. I said, wow, I feel miserable. And then there was a bolt of lightning, kaboom. And I said, heck, I'm not going to give in to that. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm away from my parents. I'm away from all that. I'm going to get out there. And I'm going to see what this world has to offer me.
Now I would like to call on the stage our headmaster, Mr. Younes, to give this prize to Mr. Christopher Henter. A token of appreciation. Just like me.